Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today. This is actually the second episode of our newly launched series, Psychological Safety and Focus. If you are listening to us for the first time, here's a bit of context. At Cosmic Centaurs, psychological safety has been a core part of our work for many years, shaping how we design organizational assessments, leadership programs, team experiences, and even how we operate internally. It's central to our belief that teams perform at their highest when people feel safe enough to speak up, ask questions, share concerns, and learn together. Cosmic Centers became the exclusive MENA and Arabic language partner of the organizational scan this year, the gold standard assessment of measuring psych safety. The previous organization scan was founded by Amy Edmondson, Harvard professor behind the concept of psychological safety, and Sander Hawken, who was also our guest in Dubai a few weeks back. This partnership brought validated research-backed measurement tools, now available in Arabic as well, to leaders and teams across our region. This month, we also launched our first organizational scan practitioners cohort, where we are certifying HR professionals and other consultants and coaches to run the Philos organization scan. Today, we're here to talk about Psych Safety Day. Actually, last Wednesday, Marilyn was also a guest and part of this global event happening for the second year, dedicated to raising awareness about psychological safety, bringing together researchers, thought leaders, companies, HR professionals, coaches, and consultants from around the world to discuss their experience with psychological safety. It also features a talk by Amy herself talking about the global research insights, along with Sander Hawken, and revealing what are the findings of the research. And this is what we are here actually to discuss today. The day was really interesting. I attended most of the sessions, and the rest I'm going to attend because they are recorded. It was a virtual, running different experiences, whether it's keynotes, panels, experiential sessions, very interactive ones, discovering and exploring psychological safety from different angles. And actually, the impact was really beautiful to see because people were able to interact and give feedback and resonate live. And it was really beautiful to see all of this community coming to life. There was hundreds of people in each session, and it was really it felt really special. So in today's webinar, we will be discussing the takeaways of the day, focusing on the global research, as I said, but also talking about the panel that Marilyn participated in about psychological safety across cultures. Without further ado, Marilyn, thank you for joining us today. Any thoughts about Psych Safety Day?
I mean, you attended way more than I did because I was in London delivering a training. So I have to say, I'm not as good a student as you. I mostly know what was said in my panel and what was said in the Fearless Report kind of preview. So actually, I'm hoping to learn from you what I missed out on.
Yeah, actually, I was in Chad Littlefield session. This is the ones that marked me the most. I don't know if you know him. He has a published book called Ask Powerful Questions. And it's all about connecting to other people on a human level. And he did a beautiful exercise during the session, which is great in terms of also inclusion and portraying what psych safety actually can be, how it can be practiced in facilitation. Because he asked us all to share, to write in the chat practices that we think are successful in terms of enforcing or cultivating psychological safety. But he didn't ask us not to click on enter until the timer is over. So he gave us 2 minutes because this portrays how people sometimes feel shy to speak up or they feel influenced by other people who are the louder voice in the room or who speak first. So he asked us to click enter all at the same time, not to be influenced by what other people said. And it was so beautiful to see all the different messages going up in the chat. And he did something really nice at the end. He sent us a recap of all the practices that I'm happy actually to share and post in the resources later, which had really practical ideas. So that was the beauty of the day, actually, that it had a lot of practical things that people can do in their teams or leaders can implement in their teams. And yes, it was very, very useful. So happy to share more resources in the chat later. And now to our topic related to the global research. I want to maybe first explain what the global research is about, because maybe not everyone is familiar with this project. And then we can talk about the insights and discuss what we learned from them. Actually, the Fearless Organization Scan is built directly on Amy's Edmondson original research, and it has 7 questions broken down into 4 domains to measure psychological safety. And what the global research does is that every year, the Fearless Organization makes the survey available for free for organizations around the world to measure psychological safety in their teams, and they add to them few questions in order to measure or have an insight about the relationship between psychological safety and other concepts. Other concepts are different every year. Last year, I think there was mostly focused on quitting thoughts, if I remember well, but this year it was loneliness, leadership levels, remote work policy. The research had an objective to demonstrate the relationship of psychological safety levels with these other concepts that we face in our workplace. They got around this year, I think, 10,000 participants across diverse geographies and industries. We're happy to say that we had a couple from the region, and hopefully we have more next year in order also to have our data represented in this research. And during the Psych Safety Day, Sander and Amy came to walk us through some of the findings of the global research. It's not everything. They will publish a full report beginning of the year. And what I heard also Sander say that next year they might open it earlier to give people more chance and organizations more chance to participate. So making it available for a longer time next year in order to also give the chance to more data to come in. I'm going to share my screen and then we can directly start looking at the results. Give me a second.
Yeah, I really think that that's the value that the Fearless Report adds over Amy's research. I mean, for many years, I remember one of my first conversations with Mark Mortensen at INSEAD was about the fact that this was a good 5 years ago, that while a lot of Amy's work was really interesting and the discussion around psychological safety was essential, there wasn't a lot of guidance on, okay, how do I get better at it? And I think, of course, with the 2 books that she's since published, as well as this report, we get a lot of academically vetted, statistically relevant evidence around what other adjacent things can help to improve psychological safety in teams. So I think that's, for me, is the biggest gift of this report. We get to contrast psych safety data with other scales so that we can learn about how we can do better as leaders.
Also, I would add to that it will help us maybe convince other people, or other leaders, or other members of our teams that actually psych safety has impact on other components of the team engagement, or maybe impact on the business, like different. And that was also a topic that was a lot discussed during the day, that psych safety impact goes into a lot of different places in the company, whether it's engagement, levels of well-being, loneliness, and also most importantly performance, which is the leading, like today what Amy says is that psych safety is the leading indicator of team performance. I think those findings help enrich the conversation around what psych safety can help move in a company or can help improve. And that gives us data to add to it, which is really needed. Let me start by showing you maybe some of the first results that we can see, and then we can talk over it. First, I'm gonna give you an idea about the 7 questions that are the base of the psych safety survey. And these are the ones that if you participate in the Fearless Organization Scan, you and your team members are going to answer. What the global research does is that it adds on top of these 7 questions, few questions, as I said, to measure the relationship or the impact of psych safety and how it is perceived in different contexts. So the few questions we had this year, I'm going to jump to the first one, was around the team diversity or composition. So the question really was measuring the level of psych safety when there's a different diversity level inside a team. And what we see very clearly is the more diverse the team is, the higher psych safety levels are. And that's like a bit normal because let's say you are I don't know, like a comms person sitting in a room of experts on economy, and you will find it very hard maybe to participate in their conversation because you don't know what they know. So it's normal, more or less, to shy away from maybe saying your opinion or challenging any idea if you are not at the same level of expertise as at other people. But the beauty of this data point shows that as a leader, in order to encourage more participation and innovation in a team and increase high level of psych safety, it's good that you balance out the number of different expertise in your team, depending on the context of the company and if it's relevant or not. But ideally, you would not form teams that are all from the same level of expertise because you will lose in terms of innovation, etc., because people will not be seeing things differently or participating or giving their maybe feedback or opinion. And the thing that is highlighted here is that one of the four domains of psych safety is mostly impacted by this information. So actually, attitude to risk and failure scores the lowest when we are in a team that is very much homogeneous, because maybe there's more um, risk or let's say more fear of failure or more a risk averse culture, because we are fearing to be judged by other people who are more experts on the same topic than us. These are like first thoughts. I know, Marilyn, if you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, this one, honestly, when Marie disappeared, but I'll keep talking until she's back. But I think this one, honestly, felt really personal to me. For those of you who don't know me well, I've had a very non-linear career. I've gone across many different industries. So I started in architecture, then moved to tech, then moved to real estate, then moved to running the Dubai Opera. And I always joke that I was incompetent at every one of these jobs. But the beauty of having been incompetent, so again, of being in a room of experts and not being the expert, is that I de facto didn't know anything. So it liberated me to ask silly questions, to start from scratch, also sometimes to rely on what the experts had to say in the room. There was no comparison necessary because I was incompetent anyway. So actually, when I saw this data point, it really made me smile because I've experienced it firsthand. And in some ways, it at least the way like I lived it is like great. Since I know nothing, then I can only go up from here. Um, and so I really, really resonated with this. I think a lot of generalists would too. Of course, we know from a lot of different sources that diversity is important in a team. It's really lovely to see another additional data point that showcases why. Just putting people around the table that don't come from the same realm, don't have the same expertise, liberates the conversation. And so that's, again, a really interesting thought process around whether it's how you build teams or bringing together task forces or, for me directly from an organizational structure perspective, there's a lot to be learned here. It obviously relates to a lot of the work that we see around self-organized clusters and agile organizations, which also rely on this principle of like the autonomous cell that can get its work done. So beyond the attitude to risk and failure, I think we know a lot of the positive impacts of diverse teams. So wonderful to see that concept connected here to psych safety.
Beautiful. Let me tell you, you're very special in that because not everyone feels comfortable when they know the least in a room. So yeah, like it's a bit. We will see, and this is maybe one of the feedbacks that we are gonna share at the end, is that actually it's not natural for people to feel comfortable when they know less than others in the room, and that would create this fear of risk and failure. So having the right mindset when you get into the room and not fearing asking questions is a skill that it is advised to master, especially
Yeah, you
when
have
you're
to study
here.
that one. It doesn't come naturally for
Yeah,
sure.
totally. So the more you ask questions, the more you learn. And there's no stupid questions, as you say, at Cosmic Centers. Beautiful. That's like one of the first insights that we're sharing today from the global research. Let's look at the second one, which examines more the okay, now it's on the screen. The work from home and like work location policies, how does that intersect with the psychological safety? And as you can see on the screen, what we find is that when organizations enforce working from the office, psych safety levels are lower. And then it goes up when it's a hybrid model. So people like organizations allowing some days of working from home, and then also when it's fully virtual, it's where also psych safety is higher than when it's working from office policy. This also relates to the feeling of safety, so feeling trusted when you work from home, that your organization trusts that you are working and productive and contributing and doing what you need to do. When companies enforce working from the office, this sends the message that they need to be watching over every action or every work or projects that you do, and they do not trust that you are fully operational when you are working from home. And that explains a bit the psych safety levels that we are seeing here. Across all organization, I guess this is something that may be different because of the policy. And I think one insight that Amy resurfaced in the discussion was we need to double check if actually the fully virtual is a policy or it is by design of the company. So that doesn't mean that if companies are going fully virtual, that they are giving a full agency. Maybe they don't have an office or they don't have a choice. So there was a debate around how much this question actually is giving us reliable data. And I know,
Hmm.
Maria, that you have an opinion about that.
I do. I mean, I think it's one thing to, I understand Amy's point, and of course, it's her job to be the academic who tries to make sure that the scales say what they're supposed to say. And I understand her hesitation here because it was a single question, so it's not even a scale. And as you say, Marie, like my organization is fully virtual, doesn't give people agency. But I would take a step back in the story because I think data means nothing if you don't tell the story behind it. There are not that many companies in the world that are fully virtual. And I would say that typically people fight for those jobs at this point, especially with all the return to office mandates that we've seen. And in fact, you choose to work for a fully virtual company. So the agency may not be in the days at office versus not. It may be in that I chose to work here because it was fully virtual. So we know that, like we can imagine the story. It's not like the world is evenly divided between fully virtual and fully in office organizations. So I would color Amy's hesitation a bit more. And I would also say, like, that, by the way, every single other data point on the planet, all the research we see about return to office mandates show us. So again, psych safety being an intermediary measure to performance. If we were to take productivity as an example, or we could take innovation, but so much of the research that has come out, I have a few here that I want to cite. So um, uh, they looked across 61 industries. So this is the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, and showed that remote work, or the choice of remote work, has a positive association with total factor productivity. They did a survey that showed that team productivity scored 4.2 over 5 for flexible or remote model versus 3.1 over 5 for office only models. So I really do think that this generally the idea, and I think you mentioned it, Marie, like this idea of treating people like adults, trusting them, not requiring control in order to increase productivity, but believing that people do want to do their job, even if some exceptions take advantage of the system. that they will self-organize, that they'll make the right decisions, that they'll be together when they need to and be apart when they need to, generally is a good idea. Generally, it's a good idea to think that your employees are adults and to let them make the right decisions. And just last week, I was facilitating a 2-day workshop for a team in the UK. And that actually really came up as like one of the things that the team members were the most grateful for, that their leader, just if they needed to do a walking meeting, they do a walking meeting. If they needed to stop to exercise because that's what's going to give them an energy boost so they can return with more energy and vigor to the rest of their day, their leader is happy with that. And so that really came up as something they loved. And I really loved that the leader emphasized that the reason why he was able to provide this level of agency is because on the other side, he knew how accountable they were. And so as always, that balance between the freedom, the psych safety, and the accountability. So again, this data point doesn't surprise me, and I'm a bit less hesitant than Amy because I'm not a Harvard professor to kind of discount it because the data is not significant enough.
Marilyn, I want to flip the coin here, and I see also Russia having the same thought. Do we think, or would remote work environment actually make it harder for psych safety levels to be up? And would that...
You see that anyways, right? Like the blue line is lower than the dark green one.
Yeah.
And of course it is, because human beings are designed to be together. They're designed to collaborate live. Like remote environments are not natural to us. And that means that if you're not more intentional in remote environments, you cannot recreate the elements, the ingredients of the recipe just as easily as when we're together. And, in a way, fully remote teams, they amplify bad management, right? So if that person would have been a bad manager in person too. It's just that the remote aspect means that we cannot solve for things without noticing that we're doing that, and everything has to be intentional and planned. And so it favors also leaders who maybe are more disciplined, more explicit, more, I'm sure it favors certain characters as well. But from our own experience, we know how to develop psychological safety in remote teams. We are a remote team most of the time. We've been like that for the last 5 years. And so we've developed our special recipe. And of course, we come back to this over and over again, but our rituals, I think, are at the heart of it. The various things that we do, the daily stand-ups, the monthly retrospectives, the ice cream parties when we want to celebrate something, the celebrating people's birthdays and getting to know each other, and volunteering for something together, and all of these things, like, they take a lot of planning. It's very easy to miss them, but we're very committed to them. So we know from experience that you definitely can. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say our psych safety score is like 95% or something. So yeah, I mean, Marie, what do you think that we do in terms of good practices other than the rituals when it comes to psych safety in our team?
Yeah, a lot. I think the way I would frame this is that there's a thinking that psych safety happens in corridor talks, and these do not exist in a remote setting. And that's where you need to compensate for that. And lots of practices that we do that I actually love, especially when we are working, collaborating on a document together or chatting through Slack in order to discuss something. And we know that there's a lot of interpretation for when you type something versus for when you say it, because the person doesn't see your face or like your situation or how you are feeling that day. And I think something we start doing like at the beginning of the day, like announcing, and that's something you do a lot, Marie. Like, today I'm feeling a bit stressed. So if there's something that come out of me that sounds a bit, let's say, rude, please take it into consideration. It's not personal. So being explicit even about like the way you are talking to someone, sometimes people might perceive a communication being a bit harsh, or sometimes we are just lacking the time to put a lot of context, and then we can come back later on and explain. But as you said, like the rituals, the amount of rituals that we have where we see each other during the day or the week, connecting over personal stuff, not only work stuff, helps a lot in that, and helps reduce the feeling of loneliness, which I'm gonna get to in the actual next
Yeah.
insight. Is,
One last thing I'll say about this, just to wrap it up, because I do want to give a shout out to the team, is
sorry.
that what is really also helpful is that we made it everybody's collective kind of problem to do these things. So there will definitely be weeks where I'm willing to like not commit to a ritual or cancel it or we're overwhelmed, but someone else will take it upon themselves. We actually have this in our competency model, which is to say, like, have you not only lived up to our values, but directly yourself contributed to leading an activity, celebrating someone's birthday, whatever it is, that has added to, the pot.
Yes.
And so we made it explicit this year. It's in our competency model. We consider you a competent centaur if you do that. Um, but even before we put it in the model itself, like there was always people jumping into volunteers. So it never felt like everything was just on my shoulders or yours or Tala's or, like eventually everybody contributes a piece, no matter how small. And the fact that it feels like a collective thing to protect and develop also is really, really helpful.
Totally. And something Rasha is saying in the chat is the real magic is when you can start working asynchronously and give more autonomy to workers. It takes a big amount of trust and creates better relationships, actually. Thank you for that, Rasha. I just realized that we are missing the loneliness slide, but let me give you the feedback. Maybe someone from the team can add it later, because I was making a point around does working remotely increase the feeling of loneliness? And that is one of the questions that was in the research added by our friend Connie Hadley. And I think that was the most surprising data point from this research is actually nearly 20% of the respondents reported feeling lonely, more lonely when they're at the office. So being in the same location does not mean that people do not feel lonely because of low psych safety environment. And that's something that is a bit shocking in terms of data point. Um, so it does say a lot about the real ingredients here, and it's not about the location, it's more about the quality of the relationships, the sense of autonomy that people have, but also the intentional effort to include people and also be human in the way we integrate or communicate with other people, and being always attentive and intentional about how we are bringing people in. So that was one of the most beautiful, I think, realization of this research, and maybe deserves a study on its own in order to understand what makes people feel lonely at work and how does that relate to psychological safety.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a terrifying number. Of course, maybe it's also more true. I wonder about this. Maybe it's more true in some cultures than others. I can imagine how it might be more true in individualistic societies than in collectivist ones, but that's just my personal bias. Um, but it's really terrifying to know that you can be surrounded by people and feel alone. And again, as you so beautifully pointed out, it points to our capacity to create human connection and also to feel like human connection is part of the mandate of organizations. And, we often say this, that if you look at data through time, over the decades, we spend more and more time at work and less time in our own communities, less and less time with family and friends and your community, which to me indicates that organizations have a duty of care to help recreate that community. As I take you away, if I'm going to make you spend less and less time with the people around you for whatever reason, then I should feel responsible for recreating the community for you. And I really think this should be in the charter of every organization as one of its key responsibilities.
Totally. I was listening to a podcast the other day. I can't remember the name, but they were talking about how friendships are formed in your adult years. And the biggest source of it is actually your workplace, and how these relationships, even if you left and went to work in another company, you still, like when you see friends from an older organization, like how you feel the connection directly coming back, and that you feel the time didn't really pass. So like those friendships that we build at work also are very important, and they can contribute, even if it's indirectly, to our performance in the company. So something Sanders said, I think in the discussion, was like, people glad to work with. Like, this is something that is really important. The more you have people you are glad to work with at work, the more you are gonna be performing and feeling safe, etc., and happy with being at work. So definitely, that's a big topic and that deserves like more deep dives. I'll move us along to the next insight, and that one is a bit more um, less surprising. Let's say last year in the research, there was a question related about of your position, like in the company. So, are you a leader or not? And that question shows already that people who are in a leadership position have higher psych safety levels than people who are not. And
Mhm.
this year, they went a bit deeper into the insight, and divided the question to show the different levels of seniority in the company, and how the psych safety levels move with that. And you can see, like, it's a pretty linear, maybe a bit less on the executive leader, which is interesting to see. But as you grow in the organizational chart, let's say, you get more and more confident about your level of contribution. You get more confident about saying your opinion, and you have the feeling that there is more psych safety and the environment around you, because you personally feel more psychologically safe. And that also is something that is noticeable across different domains. And it's interesting to see. I think here, as I said, not very much surprised. Maybe there's something to say around the executive leader.
Yeah,
Uh,
actually, I resonated with that. I don't know if you remember, but when we did our psych safety assessment, uh, for example, one of the questions where I rated us low compared to the whole team was diversity and inclusion, one of the domains.
yeah.
And I remember saying to you guys, I'm like, you all feel included because we're a bunch of like Arab speaking women. But so you feel included yourselves. But imagine what it would be like to hire a French man, or whatever it is. So I don't know. This is purely anecdotal, but I remember that there were dimensions where maybe I had zoomed out a bit more and tried to look at the perspective not of just how the team as it is today, but as it maybe should be. And so I had scored us lower on some dimensions. I was the one to bring down our score from like 100%, I think.
Totally. Um, yeah, actually, we've talked about this a lot in previous webinars, maybe, about how leaders also feel more lonely, because they feel the pressure also when you want to, let's say, ask for help or admit vulnerability. There's more pressure on them to do that, which might make them feel less psychologically safe. In general, leaders have a high perception of their teams in terms of how much their teams are actually feeling comfortable sharing, etc. And we've seen in applications and work we've done with several teams, then when we run the scan, actually, they are surprised by some of the results, because they have a different perception of how their team members actually feel. And this is what makes this exercise actually more interesting for leaders, is to have a reality check, let's say, about how their teams feel around different domains of the psychological safety. And one of them, actually, in a very much related theme, I hope it's the next slide. Yes, actually, the effect or the impact of the highest paid person opinion. So goes along like in the same lines. and this is perfectly linear in terms of the more people feel that there's a strong member on the team, the less that they're gonna maybe feel safe to share. And decisions end up going always to the highest paid person in the team. And that's where this leader needs to be even more intentional and create more space for their team members to participate and to say what they really think or to challenge ideas, because they need it and they know they need it. But as I said, because they have the perception that it's actually there, it ends up really not being something that is true or existing in the team. So here, for the leader, it's a message to actually be more intentional about bringing people in when it comes to taking decisions, and that's something that needs to be practiced more and more in order to get more innovation, performance, people growing, people being exposed to things that are maybe in different domains. So it's the path for also people to grow and become more efficient and more productive and more useful to the leader. So a lot to unpack here about how a leader can actually create this environment where even if they are the highest paid person in the room, not everything goes as they say. Marie, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, like the analysis is spot on. This and the previous one are very much linked to each other. I think that, oftentimes leaders, again, it depends on culture, but oftentimes leaders think that that is what they're supposed to do. As in, like, we believe that to lead is to make decisions on behalf of others and to take the risk on their behalf. So I also always want to say that a lot of times these things can be, coming from a place of good intentions. Um, Especially, I always joke that if you grew up in a French education system, you believe that you have to have the right answers, not the right questions. So again, depending on your background, you might experience this differently. And so you just think that's your job. And at some point, especially the kind of in good leadership development journeys, you realize that actually your job is to build the system where others can do this and to enable them to make good decisions and to step out cautiously to kind of decide, this decision is not going to have a dramatic effect. I'm going to explicitly let someone else make it. Or where relevant, to use participatory decision making. That comes as level 2 in a way. And so it's not always easy. And in a lot of cultures, again, like in very hierarchical ones, we turn to leaders to make, like, we invite them to behave in this way. And so it is extremely counterintuitive to do otherwise, and sometimes may even be perceived as weak leadership on their behalf. Oh, this leader never makes a decision. They don't want to take the risk. No, this leader is allowing you to take the space. So it's definitely like a fine line and always a work in progress, which I guess is the good news. We're all work in progress. And as long as we try different ways of doing things and see how the system reacts, then we're on the right track.
Beautiful. Actually, a great question from Faten about that. Like, where do you feel measurement ends and leadership judgment begins when interpreting psych safety results?
I would say this about any survey. This is why we never run surveys without interviews, without hanging out at the office with the people and seeing how they interact, because this a single score across 10 teams can mean 10 different things. And so I would say that, we always say that the right kind of decision making or the right approach is always data-driven intuition, and it's always coupling data with stories and looking under the hood. So I never think that you can do one without the other. And of course, Amy Edmondson is very adamant that psych safety is not a scorecard, and you're not meant to just look at the score. You're meant to just use it as a way to align and to have a conversation, but not as an ultimate goal.
Totally. She explicitly said it in that session at the end. I remember she said, psych safety is the enabler, it's not the goal. And her famous quote about like it's the soil, not the seed. It's actually the environment that let the seeds grow, and that's what how we need to look at it. Not looking at the scores per se, looking at the whole context. As you said, we do interviews, we look like we see how teams behave with each other, we observe, and all of this together like bring us to what actually the issues are and where we need where this team needs to improve, or what are the rituals or interventions that can help. And that like gives us the full picture. And what psych safety does is that it puts numbers in front of the leaders and have the conversation started. And that's what it is built for in design. So again, like always, a reminder that sometimes we just need to forget about the numbers and look deeply into what is really happening under those numbers. That brings us to the end of the insights for now. As Sander said, that there's a lot more coming in the big report that is going to be published by the Fearless Organization SCAN. And before we close off, I want Marilyn to take a few minutes and talk about the panel that you participated in. First, we are very proud and happy to see that our voice and the region was represented alongside others in this panel. So this panel had featured other panelists, for example, Mehmet Baha from Germany, who published also a book about psych
It was
safety.
also Turkish. And Marina Capizzi, who's Italian, and
Yeah,
Fran
from
Di
Sofia.
Domenico.
Yeah, it was a really interesting panel, seeing how really people from different corners of the world experience and live psych safety. And Anita Polite Wilson really facilitated in a beautiful way. Enjoyed all the conversations that we've heard, and the common outcome of this was to say that psych safety is a lot personal and situational, and it can be lived and expressed differently from a culture to the other. And every panelist on this panel shared examples of how this is lived in their cultures. Marilyn, do you recall any examples or anything that really struck you during this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as you say, the first thing is that psychological safety, as we know from the data, is universal in its dimensions, but extremely cultural in its expression. Cultural to the local culture of the place, but also to the culture of the organization, to the culture of the team, and that whatever practices you choose to bring to life have to fit into that culture and be in alignment with it, or at least if they're going to clash with it, they have to do it softly, you know. So we have a lot of our own experience of like taking practices from other places, but then thinking like, okay, but how does it apply here? Are people on this team actually going to challenge their boss? How do we get them to do it in a way that feels safe? How do we get people to give each other feedback when they will add them? If you ask them, they say, no, I would never say this to them. How do we then like get them to that place? So we know a lot of that experience ourselves, but it was really nice to hear from people who come from all over the world and how they do that adaptation. I think definitely another great common narrative is around the need for systems and the need for structure, as we mentioned earlier with our rituals or anything that we've spoken about. The intentionality, the rhythm, the cadence, the structure, the tools, the practices. This doesn't come easy. And even though, one of my observations earlier when we were chatting about even the results, and I'm going to add a slide here, is that, when you see the results of the Fearless report, nothing is counterintuitive. You're like, oh yeah, no, this makes total sense. Of course, more diversity, less loneliness. Of course, the more senior you are, the more agency you have. Of course, of course, of course. So why is it so hard then to have better psych safety scores? And I think I love the slide that actually comes from our, the practitioner cohort content, which is that, of course, all of these things, but then the kind of the basic human behavior is also essential to look at. And I love this slide. If you don't want to look ignorant, you don't ask questions. If you don't want to look incompetent, you don't talk about your mistakes. If you don't want to sound intrusive or like presumptive, you don't offer ideas unless you're asked. And if you don't want to sound like you're a negative person, you don't constantly critique everybody, even if you have a very good critique to bring. And so I think it was very nice to see that commonality, and also to say none of this is rocket science, but all of it is in the small, daily, minimal nudges. I remember at the end, kind of Dr. Anita even asking us, like, okay, in the age of AI, what are you going to do? And none of us had like rocket science answers. It was like, go back to your basics, remember human connection, stay grounded, practice your practices, you're going to be fine. So I think that was a very reassuring and very kind of simple path forward. Of course, as always, it's about the discipline of showing up in that way every day. Sanders always said, psych safety comes on horse and leaves on horse, meaning it's not a slow thing, it's very volatile, and every small action can impact it. So that's definitely a great reminder. The panel really showed that this is true wherever you go.
Beautiful. And in my opinion, that the objective of the team is to get to a point where psych safety does not feel like extra work, like it's so much embedded in everything that we do, and how we run meetings and how we give feedback, etc. And those small rituals, or like small actions that we do, really become part of our day-to-day and do not really feel like they are taking a lot of effort. That's the objective, because as you said, like it doesn't come really naturally. I think that is a great wrap up of the day. I know that there has been a lot of other different panels. I watched very quickly one around Ted Lasso and how what he teaches us about psych safety. I want to share it with Tala, actually, because we wrote one time an article around that, like what are the leadership lessons that we learned. A lot of really down to earth practical insights on that day. I think that the organizers did a beautiful job at making the concept closer and easier to understand. Can't wait for next year, actually. And as we close, I want to reiterate on the fact that psychological safety is not the goal, it's an enabler. And really the aspiration is to create people or teams with people who are capable of having those powerful conversations where everyone listens, where people feel free to ask questions, raise challenges, etc. We need it so much in our fast-paced world, like to feel that people are actually seeing us, and seeing us more than the people who are actually doing the work, but the people who we are in deeply, and bring that into the workplace. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us today. Thank you, Marilyn, for sharing your insights and comments on the Psych Safety Day takeaways. We loved having you with us, as always. Stay tuned for more webinars in the Psych Safety in Focus series. We also have another webinar that is run by Tala Aude, our Capability Development Lead, this Thursday. So if you are interested in learning more about how AI is transforming how we learn in the workplace, please tune in. It's Thursday, 3 p.m. UAE time. We're hosting Russell John Cayley, who is the best-selling author and founder and CEO of Almash AI and Ilham Studio. See you in the next webinar. In the meantime, please sign up to our newsletter. We will put the link in the chat. We'll also share a couple of resources that we mentioned today. Thank you again.
Absolutely. See you guys soon.